Have you ever left a conversation with a woman and felt drained? Not because of something obvious like losing your wallet or wasting your time, but like something deeper was taken from you. Your energy, your center, maybe even your power. It's like somewhere in the space between your words and her silence, she saw straight through you, weighed you, measured you, and left carrying something you didn't even know you were offering. And it leaves you wondering, how is it that she didn't even have to say a word to feel in control? Why is it that every effort you made to impress, connect, explain, just made you feel smaller? This isn't about being manipulated. It's not about playing games or using tricks. What we're talking about here is something older, something wired into the way men and women have interacted since the beginning of time. The uncomfortable truth is this: most men don't realize that women aren't outwitted by words. They're affected by presence. That stillness you feel when someone knows exactly who they are and doesn't need to prove it, that's what actually shifts the dynamic. And nature, by the way, figured this out long before any of us were born. We were raised in a world that tells men, perform, be loud, be sharp, make money, dress the part, say the right things, be impressive. But no one told us this. Your stillness, that calm, quiet, immovable presence, that's the real power. The kind that makes people take notice without you ever saying a word. It's not about being cold. It's about being unshaken. Think of it like this. A man who has fully mastered himself doesn't need to explain who he is. Why? Because explaining is often just a softer form of apologizing. And if you keep apologizing for your existence, even subtly, you will always end up being controlled by those who don't apologize for theirs. A lot of men think power begins with confidence in speech. They believe dominance starts when they know how to say the right thing. But Nietzsche flipped that idea completely. He believed the opposite, that true power starts when you no longer need to speak. Because let's be honest, talking is often a tool of the insecure. The man who needs to persuade is already beneath the man who can simply sit, observe, and let silence do the work. Nietzsche said it like this: the voice of beauty speaks softly. It creeps only into the most awakened souls. So, think about that. If beauty doesn't need to shout, why do you? If true power speaks in whispers, why are you yelling? Because deep down, most men still think women fall for what we say. But here's the hard truth. She's not listening to your words. She's watching what you tolerate, how fast you chase, how quickly you trade your values for a smile or a compliment. And all of this, it's communicated without a single word. Let's go even deeper. Nature didn't design women to be weak. Quite the opposite. It made them into some of the most intuitive, emotionally strategic beings on the planet. Women don't dominate through structure or brute strength. They operate through energy, impression, and most of all, absence. That's why so many men lose the moment she goes silent, because they panic. They try to fix it. They explain. They text. They chase. And in doing so, they reveal just how reactive they really are. But a man, one who's truly grounded, he doesn't react. Not to prove a point. Not to get the last word. He withdraws. Not as a punishment, but as a principle. And in that quiet retreat, something strange happens. Her control starts to dissolve, because now she can't read you. She can't predict you. And that's terrifying for someone used to being in charge of the emotional tone. See, most women are used to men who fold at the first sign of emotional withdrawal. They know the exact pressure points. They know how to get a reaction. And every time a man argues, explains, pleads, he's handing over his power piece by piece. But the man who sees through it, the one who doesn't flinch, doesn't fumble, doesn't feed the storm with more words, he becomes unpredictable. And in that unpredictability, he becomes interesting, not because he's chasing her, but because he's not. Nietzsche once said, "He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster." That doesn't just mean evil. It means don't become the thing you're fighting. Don't become needy while fighting for attention. Don't become weak while trying to prove strength. Every time you argue to be understood, every time you react to be seen, you become a puppet, controlled by the need for approval. But the man who stops playing the game, he's on another level entirely. The Übermensch, Nietzsche's idea of the evolved man, isn't just someone who conquers others. It's the man who conquers himself, his impulses, his ego, his craving to be liked. That man doesn't need validation. And here's the paradox. When you stop craving her attention, that's when she starts craving yours. Because the moment she realizes you're not seeking her approval, not bending for her moods, not chasing her reactions, something deep inside her shifts. Not out of fear, not even out of admiration, but out of instinct. Because suddenly, she's not the mirror anymore. You are. And she can't manipulate a reflection she doesn't understand. Now let's be clear. Women are not the enemy, but they are testers, emotional testers. And you better believe they'll test your edges, your values, your patience, your sense of self. That's not malicious. That's just nature. And the sad reality? Most men fail that test. Not because they're bad men, but because they turn into boys the moment pressure shows up. Emotional, reactive, needy. But the man who stays grounded through all of it? Who sees the trap and doesn't step in? Who doesn't need her to understand him, to feel strong? That man passes the test. He doesn't argue, he doesn't defend, he doesn't chase. He just watches, silently, calmly, unbothered. And that silence, it does more damage than 1,000 speeches ever could. Not because it begs for her love, but because it doesn't need it. That's what most men never learn. Women aren't drawn to the words you say. They're drawn to the man you are when you say nothing. And that's the problem. You've been taught to fill every silence, to chase every withdrawal, to fix every emotional dip with reassurance. But what you were never told is that the silence between your words often says more than the words themselves ever could. You were told to be the hero, but not the hero who stands tall and silent. You were told to be the one who saves, who explains, who calms the storm. But a woman doesn't fall for the man who chases her moods. She falls for the man who walks into the chaos and doesn't flinch, who doesn't try to stop the rain, but simply stands there, calm, letting it pour. And make no mistake, she will test that. She has to. Not because she wants to break you, but because she wants to know you can't be broken. That's the paradox. The moment you show her that you're too concerned with losing her is the moment she begins to pull away. Not because she wants to, because she has to know. Are you solid? Are you real? Or are you just another echo? Another man pretending to be a mountain when he's really just sand? She'll disappear. She'll go silent. She'll pick a fight. She'll act cold. And every inch of you will want to reach out, explain, fix, justify. But the man who has mastered himself doesn't. Not because he's playing a game, but because he doesn't operate from fear. That's what separates the man from the boy. The boy panics at distance. The man respects it. The boy sees silence as punishment. The man sees it as clarity. And it's in that clarity that your power grows. Because now, you're no longer reacting to her moods. You're grounded. You're responding only to truth, not to her attempts to manipulate it. You become what she's never had, a mirror that doesn't lie. And it terrifies her, because it means the old tricks don't work. The passive-aggressive comments, the emotional withdrawals, the manufactured drama, none of it moves you. And for the first time in her life, she has to confront herself. Not because you told her to, but because your stillness demands it. This is where the game flips. When you stop playing, when you refuse to engage unless it's on your terms, that's when she starts to wonder, who is this man? Why doesn't he chase? What is it about him that feels so different, so powerful, so untouchable? And it's not arrogance, it's sovereignty, the quiet power of a man who's already chosen himself. And that, right there, is what makes you dangerous. Not to her, but to her illusions. Because when a man no longer seeks her approval, he becomes immune to her manipulation. He doesn't fold under her silence. He doesn't shrink under her disapproval. He doesn't argue to prove he's right. He doesn't chase love like it's owed. He simply is. And in being, he becomes the standard by which all others are measured. Here's what no one told you. Most men are too noisy to be respected, too eager to be loved, too desperate to be chosen. But the man who can sit in the storm and not raise his voice, he's the one she can't forget, because he didn't try to control her. He didn't try to win her. He didn't even try to understand her. He just stood there, unmoved, showing her a version of manhood she'd only heard about in stories. That's when everything changes. She begins to speak, not to provoke, not to argue, but to connect, to reach, to try and understand you. And the silence that once scared her now intrigues her, because it holds depth, it holds mystery, it holds the presence of a man who doesn't need her, but chooses her. And that choice, when it comes from strength, not scarcity, is irresistible. Understand this. She doesn't want to be your purpose. She wants to be chosen by a man who already has one. A man who doesn't orbit around her, but who stands firm in his own world, rooted, focused, at peace. That's why your stillness speaks louder than your promises. That's why your calm cuts deeper than any argument. That's why your refusal to beg is more seductive than flowers and poetry. Because every time you don't react, every time you choose distance over drama, every time you show her that your dignity is not up for negotiation, you're telling her one thing: you are a man she cannot shake. And in a world full of men who fold, that is rare. That is power. That is what Nietzsche meant when he spoke of the Übermensch. Not a man who controls others, but a man who controls himself. A man whose power doesn't come from domination, but from detachment. Not from games, but from groundedness. Not from manipulation, but from mastery. You don't have to yell. You don't have to chase. You don't have to explain your worth. You simply have to be still. Let her try to read you. Let her sit in the silence. Let her wrestle with the mirror you've become. And when she finally breaks that silence, listen, not to fix, not to argue, but to understand whether her words match her energy. And if they don't, you walk, quietly, completely, without a trace of regret. Because power isn't in what you hold onto. It's in what you're willing to walk away from, without looking back. That's the woman every man should fear. Not because she's cruel, but because she forces you to evolve, because she doesn't respond to weakness, to begging, to neediness. She's not impressed by your potential. She's only moved by your presence. And if you don't have that, if your frame shakes under pressure, if you lose yourself trying to keep her, she won't say a word. She'll just vanish. She won't warn you. She won't give you closure. She'll disappear into that silence you never learned to respect. And the irony is brutal. You'll finally be quiet. Too late. But here's the twist. She's not the villain. She's not the manipulator. She's just the mirror. She reflects what you bring. If you bring chaos, she becomes storm. If you bring stillness, she becomes river. If you bring purpose, she becomes devotion. But if you bring desperation, she becomes distance. Every single time. You are told to chase love, but you are never told to be the kind of man love is drawn to. That's why she leaves. Not because you weren't enough, but because you were too focused on her and not focused enough on yourself. See, the real threat isn't her. It's your own fear. Fear of loss, fear of being alone, fear of not being wanted. And fear is loud. It talks too much. It texts too much. It over-explains, over-apologizes, over-pursues. But power is quiet. Power chooses. Power waits. Power walks. So when she withdraws, don't follow. When she's cold, don't try to warm her. When she tests you, don't react. Just stay rooted. Not in anger, not in ego. In peace. In knowing that her chaos cannot pull you out of your center. Because that's when she realizes you're not like the rest. And when she sees that, that's when the fear flips. That's when she starts to wonder, what if I lose him? Because for the first time, she's standing in front of a man she cannot manipulate, cannot shake, cannot define. A man who doesn't need her, but who might, just might, choose her if she brings peace instead of noise. That's the paradox no one teaches you. The moment you stop trying to win her is the moment she starts trying to win you. And if she doesn't, you're still whole, you're still solid, you're still the mountain, because that's what makes you dangerous. Not the words you say, not the games you play, but the silence you own, the power you carry, and the standard you never lower. That is the man every woman remembers. That is the man every man should become.